All right, let's step into a time machine. We're going to set the dial back 500 years to Paris in 1525. But first, I need you to forget everything you think you know. Forget the romantic city of lights, the art, the cafes, the fashion. The city we're about to walk into, it's a completely different beast.
And I mean that literally, because the very first thing that would hit you wouldn't be the amazing architecture. It would be the smell, an absolutely overwhelming, legendary stench that would honestly define the city for centuries.
They actually had a name for it, the boue de Paris, or the mud of Paris. Just try to imagine this thick, black, sticky paste, and it's coating every single narrow, winding street. This is what you get in a city with no sewers, no garbage collection, a place where you just threw everything, and I mean everything, right out the window. And get this, that mud was shared by 200,000 people, all crammed together inside these massive fortified walls. At the time, Paris was the biggest city in all of Christendom. It was this claustrophobic, deafening, but incredibly vibrant place where life just spilled out everywhere. And really, this gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Paris in 1525 was a city of insane contrasts. It was still so deeply medieval in its bones, dark, gothic, dangerous, but the very first rays of the Renaissance were just starting to break through all that gloom. So, to really get a feel for the city, you have to understand its geography. It wasn't just one big blob, it was really divided into 3 distinct hearts, and each one had its own unique purpose and personality. So right in the middle, on the island, you had the Ile de la Cité. That was the seat of power, religion, and government. To the south, you had the left bank, which was home to all the rowdy students of the Sorbonne University. And then to the north, there was the right bank, and that was the bustling engine of commerce, where most regular Parisians actually lived and worked. And just think about Notre Dame for a second. Forget that clean, gray stone building we know today. By 1525, the cathedral was already 300 years old. Its statues were painted in these vivid reds and blues and golds, but by then they were all fading under centuries of grime. And the square out front? It wasn't some open plaza, no way. It was a cluttered mess of market stalls and beggars. You see that same kind of transition happening at the Louvre. If you went there in 1525, you would not find a world-class art museum. You'd find a grim medieval fortress dominated by this huge dungeon tower. It was only just beginning its transformation into the grand Renaissance palace we think of today. But the story of Paris in 1525 isn't just about mud and buildings. It was a year of intense, high-stakes political drama, a crisis that literally threatened the entire Kingdom of France. And the man at the center of it all was King Francis I. This guy was the real deal. 6 feet tall, a warrior, a poet, a lover of art. He was the one who brought Leonardo da Vinci and the Mona Lisa to France. He was the absolute picture of a Renaissance king. But then, in February of 1525, the unthinkable happened. At the Battle of Pavia in Italy, the French army was just annihilated, and King Francis I himself was captured on the battlefield. Can you imagine? The King of France, this great Renaissance prince, was now a prisoner in Spain. Well, this threw Paris into absolute chaos. With the king gone, his mother, Louise of Savoy, had to rule as regent. But this power vacuum let the Parliament of Paris, which was this really powerful judicial body, start flexing its muscles. They used the whole situation as an opportunity to launch a brutal crackdown on this new idea spreading from Germany, Protestantism. The burning of heretics began. And all this turmoil wasn't just happening in the halls of power. Down on the streets, this crazy blend of medieval darkness and emerging light defined daily life for every single person in Paris. For example, to cross the river, you might take the Pont Notre Dame. But it wasn't an open bridge. It was basically a street built over the water, lined on both sides with 60 multi-story houses and shops. It was a suffocating tunnel of commerce, selling all these luxury goods, while the river flowing right below it was the city's open sewer. Nearby was the Place de Grève, the city's main port. This is where goods like wine and wheat were unloaded, but it had a much, much darker purpose. This was also the city's main stage for public executions. Thousands of people would gather to watch, buying snacks from vendors while people were hanged or beheaded or burned. And then, in the shadows, you had the legendary underworld, best seen in the Court of Miracles. This was a slum so dangerous that the City Watch wouldn't even go in. It was called that because at night, the blind beggars would miraculously get their sight back, and the crippled would stand up perfectly straight to count the money they'd made that day.
But, it wasn't all darkness. Amidst all the squalor and the violence, these brand new ideas and technologies were starting to take hold. The light of the Renaissance was finally beginning to pierce through that medieval gloom.
And this really happened in 3 key ways. First, the printing press absolutely exploded in the Latin Quarter, and suddenly knowledge was for sale to anyone who could afford a book. Second, new humanist ideas started to challenge the absolute authority of the church. And third, the wealthy started building these grand mansions designed for comfort and beauty, not just for defense.
So this is it. This is the fundamental story of Paris in 1525. It was a city literally at war with itself. On the one hand, you've got the filth, the public violence, the organized crime of the Middle Ages. But on the other hand, you have the birth of modern knowledge, critical thinking, and a whole new appreciation for beauty and comfort.
So, yeah, Paris in 1525 was definitely not a romantic fairy tale. It was a smelly, violent, and incredibly difficult place to live. But it was also a crucible, one of those places of intense heat and pressure where completely new things get forged. And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. In that crowded, chaotic, noisy mess, an entire worldview, the Middle Ages, was dying. And right there, in its place, the modern world, the world of the Renaissance, was taking its very first gasping breath.
It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we look around at all the turmoil and contradictions of our own time, it's probably worth asking, what chaos right now is forging our own future?